So the bombshell video, the Dalton video with Tom Ferry at the Tom Ferry Podcast Experience, has actually been submitted as evidence to the jury in the Bombshell Commission lawsuit out of Kansas City. We've had a clarification on that. I was under the impression that the judge told the jury to disregard it. That's how I read the reporting. But last night, sorry about that. Last night, wrong button. Last night, the reporter at the scene covering the court case from Kansas City, Andrea from Inman, and forgive me if I get her last name wrong. I'm just going to say Andrea B. Her handle on Twitter is Inman Andrea. She clarified, since there seems to be some confusion about this, apparently I'm not the only one, but it's clear now. The jury in the case was not instructed to disregard the Dalton video. So therefore, that's really good news for the plaintiffs. The judge said the defendants had, quote, failed to timely object to the video exhibit, which he deemed, quote, properly used. So thank you, Andrea from Inman News, for providing that clarification. It was, I guess, apparently not only my understanding, but others, that the judge had indicated to the jury that they should disregard it. Apparently, that is not the case. So that is bad news for the defendants and very good news for the plaintiffs. Now, yesterday we had a lot of fun with the fact that Tom Ferry deleted his podcast episode with Mr. Dalton after it was shown as part of the trial. So I wanted to go back to see if that was still the case. Kind of a funny thing happened. The conversation is still up at Inman when you go to the Inman article, but it's actually not the same video. The video is now been posted by a spam account, probably directly related to the plaintiffs. And this spam account was created yesterday. So I'm guessing the plaintiffs had this downloaded. And then once Tom Ferry deleted it from the internet, and of course the internet's forever, right? Once he deleted it from the internet, they put it up on some spam account, which I thought was pretty funny. Don't worry, we're not going to play this again. We played it yesterday as part of the live stream. We played it the day before as part of the live stream. And it is hilarious and horrifically damning as well for the defendants, right? Tremendously damaging for those parties. And of course, because, as I said, the internet is forever, the video's up. Notwithstanding Tom Ferry's, who is the #1 real estate coach in the industry, he'll tell you that. Notwithstanding his efforts to delete it, it's not a conspiracy. The internet never forgets. So I think it's actually going to have, I think it's already had, like what do they call that? The Streisand effect, right? When you complain about something or try to delete something, then it focuses more attention on the item, Tom. So yeah, not a good move on your part. You should have just left the video up, and then fewer people, including people like me, would have made us think about it, and it would have got less attention. Instead, definitely the Streisand effect in that regard. Now, following up on Andrea B. from Inman and her exceptional reporting from Kansas City, I thought that this exchange with the various experts was very, very, very interesting. So let's dive into that. During his testimony, Wu, who was one of the experts for the defendants, I believe, also told the juries that the plaintiff's expert, so it's like expert versus expert, shouldn't have looked at the real estate market in Australia as a comparable country, and they should have looked inside of the U.S. without the cooperative compensation rule, namely the Northwest MLS and the Real Estate Board of New York. When you look at those markets, 100% of all listings still offer a cooperative compensation system, despite not having the rule, which I think was Mr. Wu's point. And that's very interesting. In a way, that's really, if you stop and think about it, compelling for the defendants, because you could argue when it's optional, sellers still do it, and therefore it's sellers, they want to do it. And therefore remember, you got to talk about the right plaintiffs. Who are the plaintiffs? The sellers are the plaintiffs. And so if you're making an argument that the sellers would have done this anyways, it's kind of hard to make an argument that they've been aggrieved or forced to do it through an antitrust conspiracy. So very interesting point by Mr. Wu to say that, hey, sellers are still doing this in the markets where it's optional in the United States. On the other hand, the fact that sellers are still doing it in other markets where it's optional, and I'd love to see some data. I know Bright MLS has also made it optional starting in August. I wonder if we're going to have some data coming out of there somewhat soon. Since it's optional, this also cuts a different way. Not only is it good for the defendants in the case, but it makes it more likely, I think, and shines a stronger light on the possibility of what a lot of people aren't talking about is what will the Department of Justice do in their potential intervention with this case, and or the Federal Trade Commission. What will they do? And all credit to Mr. DeWiggins at Next Home Realty. We covered him a week ago or so on this live stream, and he's pointed out that the FTC has the authority via an executive order in 2021 from President Biden to act on this issue. Now, they haven't done anything yet, but it's possible. The Department of Justice is definitely keeping a close eye. As we've mentioned, they've issued a statement of interest letter or letter of interest or whatever they call it. Remember, I'm not a lawyer, too smart to go to law school. In the MLS PIN no select case, which has now been kind of, there's a lot of effort to wrap that case up with these other cases. Do I want to mention this? No, we'll skip that. We'll skip that section. So anyway, interesting thing. What one thing might help the defendants in the short term in the court case might hurt them in the long term on the regulatory point of view. Let's switch to PCE. PCE is coming out today, this morning. We're actually going to try to cover it live for you. The estimate is 3.5 to 3.8 with a month over month at 2 or 0.2 to 0.3. So let's see if we have key inflation gauge rose as expected in September. Spending tops estimate. That's interesting. I wanted to bring you the live stream from CNBC on my live stream for you today, but someone in my household changed the Xfinity password, so I can't do that this morning. Maybe next time. Core personal consumption expenditures price index was expected to increase by 0.3 in September, according to Dow. This is breaking news. Please check back later for updates. So that's, I don't really think, combined with yesterday's number, do you really think that that is a slowing of inflation? I don't think so. I don't think that's a slowing of inflation. It's as expected. If I remember, Powell wanted to have a number of months / quarters below trend line. And yeah, we're not getting that right now. Not getting that, especially with yesterday's extremely hot quarter. Now, there is some information out there about whether or not yesterday's extremely hot GDP quarter was one-time things. And we'll find that. I'm going to dig into that a little bit more for you. The 10-year has been basically range trading for the last several days. Right now, we're at 4.8. We've been somewhere between 4.8 and the upper of 4.9 for a couple of days now. This really doesn't surprise me all that much since Ackman took his shorts, right? But the fundamentals of the United States fiscal and monetary policy remain the same. And so I really do believe that this is going to be a pause before we go I hate to say it, to higher rates. By the way, I love your comments. Thank you so much. And yesterday, by the way, I asked you guys to subscribe and hit the like button. Oh my God. Like, I think that was the first time I ever did that. And we got a lot of likes and a lot of subscribers. We're now over 2,200 subscribers. So thank you so much for that. I want to talk a little bit about the deficit because that is a huge factor in inflation and interest rates. So let's go to my favorite economist. Here he is here, Peter St. Onge. He's going to give us a little bit of a discussion about where the deficit is going. Because remember, it's not only what the Fed says rates should be, but it's also government spending, which, how do I want to say that? It produces more borrowing, which is what the bonds are, right? All right, so let's go to Peter.
And that number was putting us on track, according to Congress's own bean counters at the CBO, to $45 trillion in debt by 2033. And wait,
whoa, $45 trillion by 2033. Holy smoke, that is a lot. I mean, I remember, I'm old enough to remember. I have this recollection that during the Clinton administration, we got rid of the federal debt. Am I wrong about that? I'm pretty sure that for a blink of an eye during the Clinton administration, we actually got rid of the federal deficit. Am I right about that? I think I am right about that. And that didn't last long, unfortunately.
Wait for it, $144 trillion by 2053.
How far away is 2050? That's 30 more years. So hopefully, if I live as long as Keith Richards, I'll still be here to see that. Great, something to look forward to.
Well, it turns out that was an understatement because of what the Journal calls the odd way Biden counted student loan cancellations. Essentially, when the Supreme Court struck down Biden's loan handout, the $333 billion they were going to give away got counted as a spending cut.
What? That doesn't make sense.
Which would be like me thinking about buying a Corvette. My wife tells me no, so I brag that I just made $68,000. So that little shell game means the deficit last year.
That's like my wife going to TJ Maxx and returning something and then buying something else at a big discount. Hey, it was $100, but it was on sale for $70, so I saved $30. No, you didn't save $30. You saved $70, right? And the whole point of going to TJ Maxx was to return something, not to spend more money. All right, I digress.
Wasn't up $300 billion, 1.4 to 1.7. It was actually up $600 billion. That's a 40% spike on the year, taking it to a cool $2 trillion and dramatically accelerating Washington's $144 trillion debt utopia. Now, I mentioned in recent videos.
Okay, well, you get the idea. The uniparty, I'm not going to lay this on the Democrats or the Republicans. Almost all of them are all guilty of this, right? Both sides, spending like drunken sailors, right? Or as Mr. Dalton said, like sailors outside of the Lincoln Tunnel, to just kind of wrap things up with a little bit of an analogy. Thank you, Mr. Dalton. And thank you, Mr. Ferry. But, just horrific in terms of our spending. And when you're looking at that, that is something the Fed can't control. Apparently, Congress can't control themselves either. And that is going to feed in to where the 10-year goes. And when you're looking at that number, that is the trend. And that's what's really driving the borrowing is our spending. And our spending is outrageous. There's been a lot of talk about whether what we're seeing in the market now is a seasonal thing or part of a bigger slowdown because rates are up. And I did a video about 2 weeks ago about how the supply curve has changed and also the demand curve has changed and they've shifted. So we have a really strange situation where buyers can't afford to buy, and sellers can't afford to sell. As a result, we have high prices and low volume. Usually when price goes up, volume goes up. People want to enter into the marketplace and get part of the rising prices, but they can't sell, as we've covered, because of the rate lock differential. I found this chart, and we're going to play just a teeny bit of it here. Let's see if we can blow this up a little bit for you so you can see it a little bit better. Nope, that doesn't work. I found this chart here. We'll display it like this. And if you look at recent properties, thank you, Altos Research, for this, percent of properties with recent price reductions, also thank you, Housing Wire, last year at this time, 42.5% with price cuts. This time of year, the exact time of the year, we're at about 38.5. So we're actually below last year's year-over-year number in terms of price cuts. We're not far away from where we were, but we're actually closer to the numbers from prior years than we are to last year's number. And I'm not ready, looking at this chart, to say that we've moved away from a basic seasonal change, right? Until we really exceed last year's numbers, it's way too early to say that we've moved out of the seasonal range for price cuts. As the market continues to slow down, as it typically does when we hit the Thanksgiving / Christmas holiday, perfect storm, where people start to take their older properties off the market, let it rest, and then bring it back sometime in the spring, right? At least that's fairly common. Now, we are going to see some people that keep their properties on the market during the winter, and those going to rack up days on market. And that is going to be a sign for you investors out there that the person who put their house on the market in September and still has it on the market in late January, that's going to be a sign to you. Even if it isn't a price drop, it's going to be a sign to you. Let's send in an offer that they can't refuse. No, send an offer that works on your terms, because if they have it on the market all that time, they're probably begging for an offer. If they don't need to sell, they'll take it off the market. But if they really need to sell, they'll keep it on, and you might be able to get a really good bargain, relatively speaking, in January or February for those people that keep their houses on the market over the deep winter freeze. So I've actually been, trying to tell my investor clients, let's keep an eye on that, even if we don't see price drop. The simple fact that it's still on the market is an indicator. So there's this blogger here in Massachusetts, a real estate guy, and he's been incredibly prolific and long-term real estate blogger. He's fantastic at SEO, and his name is Bill Gassett. And he has an article over at Reese Media. I've never met Bill, but I've read his stuff before. Buying is a significant a milestone in anyone's life. And that is true. And he comes up with basically an argument of what buyer brokers do. And I think if you're going to be a buyer broker in the near future, and we've talked about how important it is actually to be focusing on sellers, but if you're going to be a buyer broker in the near future, this is a really good article. A very good job, Bill. Specific tasks you can count on from your buyer broker. Market research. Now, in this particular case, I think the vast majority of buyer brokers can up their game in doing market research, right? I think a lot of people look at their agent and say, okay, how much should we offer for the house? And buyer agent just says, offer them as much as you can given the current environment, rather than saying, okay, the value of the house is $500,000. Don't bid that much beyond that. I mean, okay with the range around $500,000, but don't bid $580 if it's worth $500. Well, our lender says he'll borrow us, or he'll lend us that money. He'll lend us $580. Oh boy, that sounds like how we got into the original 2008 financial crisis, where people were borrowing 100% of what the bank allows you to borrow. Just because the bank allows you to borrow that amount doesn't mean it's a good idea to borrow that amount, because you're going to be tempted to overpay for the property. So as a buyer agent, you should really be doing comps to provide your buyer clients with an accurate price of how much that property is worth. Now, it's going to be worth different numbers to different people depending upon how you're going to use the property and how long you're going to be owning the property. So if your plan is this is my perfect home and I'm never going to move, and you have like a 20 to 30 year window on this, then overpaying by 20 grand, no big deal, right? But if it's a short-term thing, the shorter the term, the more precise you need to be in what you pay for it. Property search. I got to disagree with you on this one, Bill. I mean, so many buyers find the property through the MLS reverse thing, which I guess is agent provided. But they also just find property on Zillow, which does the exact same service. Property showings. The agent has to do the property showings. It is a clunky system. Almost every property has a different way to set up a showing. Then again, a lot of buyers just go to open houses now, and then they just call their agent, hey, we just went to an open house. So that has also declined, I think, a little bit, Bill. But I think this is where these next two bullet points, where buyer agents really need to pick it up, and seller agents for that matter, negotiation and the paperwork, and especially in the negotiation. If you're an agent nowadays in the modern world, you should be really focusing your sales pitch on a soft skill, or, it's not like you're hammering something together or fixing a shoe or, providing a physical object. What you're really selling now, and I think this is a challenge for a lot of people in our business, is your ability to negotiate. You've got to be able to say, hey, if you hire me for X amount of dollars, I'm going to get you a better deal. I'm going to be getting you a better deal. That's why you're hiring me. Good morning, Sharon. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. That's why you're hiring me. So you've got to promote the negotiation factor. It's incredibly important. And also with that, Bill, in a fantastic article once again, the structure of the transaction, which is reflected in the contracts that the parties sign, the structure, especially the timing of the transaction, that is all in the nuts and bolts of the paperwork and the contract. And that goes hand in hand with the negotiation. By the way, I want to give all credit to Bill Gassett. Here's his website, by the way. He is the owner and founder of Maximum Real Estate Exposure. And I think if you go to MaximumRealEstateExposure.com, you will find his website. And he's always an interesting read. And he's been doing that for a long time. So excellent job, Bill. I want to just talk about this interesting story out of Atlanta yesterday from my new favorite real estate website, which is ResiClubAnalytics.com, which is where Lance Lambert, who used to be at Fortune, has now started this new website called Resi Analytics, Resi Club Analytics, ResiClubAnalytics.com, I guess it is, Resi Club. And it found out that Atlanta, they reported on this, Atlanta is the number one market. I found this interesting because I never really understood like all the hubbub about this. And now I understand. Institutional ownership of homes is centered in Atlanta, not here in Massachusetts. So it was like when people talked about institutional buyers buying up large tracts of housing, like that never really registered to me because it's not a Massachusetts thing. But apparently it's an Atlanta thing. And 13.5% of all institutionally owned homes are in Atlanta. And not only that, in Atlanta, institutions own 4.4% of all single-family homes, which I thought that was just amazing. Now, on the other side, we don't know who owns the other 95%. But it is a pretty high percentage of people owning, of companies like Invitation Homes, for instance, they're kind of the leader. All credit, by the way, to Park Labs for doing some of this data. P-A-R-C-L, Parkle Labs. Is that how you say it? Here's the map. Yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. Charlotte, Atlanta, Dallas, Tampa, Houston, Phoenix. So why this is important in these markets, because if all of a sudden these markets take a dinger, then some of these big institutional investors might also suffer a lot. Now, fortunately, in the Florida, Georgia, and the Carolina markets, still very strong. But Houston, Dallas, Phoenix, not so much. So here's a picture I wanted to show you here further down. Where'd it go? Oh, it's not here. Sorry. But sorry about that. I know that's hard to watch when you scroll. It wasn't there. There are sections where institutional investors do own giant swaths of like significant portions of neighborhoods. And if that market takes a dinger and there's just one investor, that investor goes out of business. So, oh, wow, that could have a huge ripple effect on everybody else's values. So something to watch, especially in those potentially struggling markets of Dallas, Houston, Phoenix, Louisiana. Very, very interesting article. Never something that crossed my mind, because up here in Massachusetts, I don't think institutional buying is not much of a factor. In fact, I don't think I can even point at one situation where we've had institutional buyers. All right, so thank you so much for joining us. Another completed week of real estate news with Jack Gately from Jack Gately Real Estate and the Online Real Estate Academy. Thank you so much. We'll see you on Monday. Go make some money and have a great day. Bye-bye.